We're back here on The Rundown, continuing the conversation near year-end. U.S. Secretary of State Rex Tillerson mounting a sort of defense of American foreign policy under Trump. So is he right or not? Still with us from Washington is John Sitilides. He's a geopolitical analyst at Trilogy Advisors and a consultant to the State Department. And David Mark, executive editor of The Morning Consult. And gentlemen, let's take a quick look at what Tillerson wrote on ISIS, on the fight against the so-called Islamic State terror group. The administration's aggressive strategy to counter IS delegates greater authority to American military commanders on the battlefield, giving our forces more freedom and speed to do what they do best in partnership with indigenous fighting forces. As a result, the coalition has accelerated operations and recaptured virtually all of previously held territory in Iraq and Syria. John, Tillerson here really largely claiming responsibility, taking credit for the defeat by and large of ISIS in Iraq and Syria. Do you think he's right to do so?
I think the Trump administration deserves credit for unleashing the U.S. military, along with our Arab and Kurdish allies in the region, against Islamic State. But much of the credit goes to the Kurds as the most effective ground force against Islamic State, and our Arab allies have been very, very important in that role as well. But I want to be cautious about one issue here. However important it was to try to eliminate the so-called caliphate of the Islamic State in Syria and in Iraq, Islamic State has transmogrified into a global network. And we're going to be dealing with problems regarding Islamic State as well as al-Qaeda and other radical Islamist organizations in Northern Africa, in South Asia, and maybe even in the South China Sea and the Philippines in the years ahead.
Right, just as we saw in Afghanistan.
Well, that's what I wanted to ask you about, David. We've just seen this horrific attack in Kabul by ISIS, and this is one of a series of a dramatic rise there in Afghanistan. Has the administration taken its eye off a bit from ISIS in Afghanistan while being so focused on Syria and Iraq?
Well, it's interesting. During the campaign, there was campaign trail talk by then candidate Trump of pulling back troops from Afghanistan, saying it was not exactly a lost cause, but not a good use of taxpayer money. And he's running into the same thing now the last two presidents before him have faced, President Obama and former President George W. Bush. There's no real good answer in Afghanistan, and as soon as pressure is let up there, a new terror group comes in, whether it's the Taliban or some version of the Islamic State or something else that essentially finds a safe haven in that state. So come 2018, that very well could be a place, a locale in which more troops, U.S. troops, are introduced.
Right, and that raises a key question of how invested the United States does want to be in the Middle East, because certainly we have heard President Trump saying also during his campaign that too much money was spent in the Middle East. Let's just touch on North Korea. Tillerson on North Korea, one of really the biggest foreign policy challenges this administration has seen. UN Security Council adopted 3 of the strongest resolutions in history. Tillerson also says a central component of our North Korea strategy is persuading China to exert its decisive economic leverage on Pyongyang. John, let me get your brief take. We have seen China being a key part of Trump's policy on trying to get pressure on North Korea. Do you think that that is working, that he can really rely on China to do that?
It's going to be tough. China, unfortunately, has a vested interest in keeping the North Korea problem alive, in trying to distract the United States, keep us on our heels in the Western Pacific region, and also to keep key allies such as Japan, South Korea, and Taiwan permanently off balance. I think also Russia is going to play a very important role here. Let's keep in mind that Russia is building a second intranet to help prop up the Kim Jong-un regime. And so I think it's going to be a matter of trying to persuade China to be helpful, bringing the Russians in, but more than anything else, building up U.S. and allied missile defenses and finding creative ways to deter the Kim Jong-un regime for many years to come.
And David, let me just ask you briefly, can this administration claim any credit for being any more successful on North Korea than the previous administrations?
Well, just going by Trump's own words, it doesn't seem that way. Just after that op-ed appeared by Secretary Tillerson, Trump himself tweeted out expressing frustration that China was not putting more pressure on North Korea, saying they had not lived up to their word and not done what he had wanted the Chinese to do. So, no, there doesn't seem to be much reason to brag on that front. And in fact, the president's taunting of the North Korea leader as rocket man, quote unquote, and some other phrases probably does not help the matter much. So he's running into the same headwinds that the previous administrations have, with all the same frustrations.
All right, gentlemen, David Mark and John Sitilides, thanks very much for weighing in. A complex issue, certainly, and one that, as is usually the case with foreign policy, might take several years to actually
Tillerson's
develop.
greatest success may have been that he simply remained in the job at the end of the year, which
yeah,
many
that
people
is already
did
a
not
pretty big
think
success.
he was going
Many
to do.
others in the White House did not have that same fate. That is it for the rundown for now. We're going to go out for 3 minutes, but much more is coming up when we're back. Don't go anywhere.